Good morning, afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Heather Cole with Lodestar Solutions, and we are really excited to share with you today the secret to getting funding for your projects. Now, for the last 30 plus years, I have been in some capacity in the software industry, from consultant to pre-sales to salesperson to project manager. I've kind of done it all. And I've noticed that there's definitely some tricks to being able to get funding that I'd love to share with you. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the first thing is that influential people tend to get funding more frequently. Now think about someone you know that is highly influential. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's someone else. And think about what attributes or what makes that person so influential. Typically, we define influential people as people who shape how we act, or maybe what we wear if you're looking at fashion influencers. But in technology, there's always a few things that make some people stand up beyond everyone else. And I think one of them is that they listen to others. They're not always the person, saying all the ideas, but they're actually really good, not just active listeners, but engaged listeners. They tend to be confident, and they oftentimes do their research and understand everything before kind of making decisions. They make people feel inspired oftentimes. Like, have you ever been around someone and they have that energy and you're like, gosh, I want to be around that. Like, in energy and passion are infectious, right? They're oftentimes very open-minded, and really good influencers are good storytellers. They've learned the art of taking complex topics, especially in technology, and make them simple. And through this, by doing this, they often gain a lot of respect. Now, you might be thinking, gosh, I aspire to be that influential person. So we're going to teach you some tricks today on how you can help yourself. But this is requiring what I call daily deliberate action. Anybody that becomes the best in their game, whether it's Michael Jordan playing basketball or Yo-Yo Ma playing the cello, it's all based on daily deliberate action. It's not the big one-time things. It's what do you do and how do you show up every day. Now, I think that when I learned, and I took a lot of time reading books, taking classes on both presentation techniques as well as storytelling. And when I learned to take really complex technology concepts, and I had a goal. My goal was to be able to explain technology to my 80-year-old mother. Now, some of you have heard me tell Susie stories before, and she's smart in certain ways, not in technology. Like, literally, sometimes she doesn't realize something doesn't work because it's not plugged in. Like, that's my mom. But if I can take complex concepts in technology and share them in a way that my mom would understand, then everyone else can. And I believe that today, if you're trying to get funding for a project, one of the big things you have to consider is in most organizations today, especially with COVID, the funding has to get approved by the CFO's office. Someone pretty high up is going to bless that project. So you need to understand what makes them tick. And here's a little secret decoder ring. Finance people are typically risk adverse. They like to know exactly, they want certainty. They want to know exactly how something's going to work or how it's going to happen or how it's going to get implemented. And they also don't like to feel stupid. So that goes to our next point here is how do you actually gain respect? And over the years, I've realized, now, my background is I am a finance major with a huge computer science background. In fact, my parents owned a software company. So I literally grew up in the software industry. And then I went to law school. So I have this kind of diverse knowledge. But I often like to watch people. And I realized that in IT, we gain respect one way. And it's different than like almost everywhere else. Think about it. How do you gain respect in IT? Well, typically, you're either the one of the smartest people in the room. Think about it. as soon as you meet someone in IT, they're like, oh, did you know this? And you love the smart guy or gal. And how we gain respect is showing how smart we are. And this works in the IT world oftentimes, but as soon as you step outside of that world, let's say you go to finance to get funding, right? And I'm going to show them how smart I am. I'm going to just wow them with my knowledge. And here's the secret. Finance people oftentimes don't understand technology. The finance world has not really changed. The world of accounting, debits and credits haven't changed for hundreds of years. Maybe a few tax code changes, right? But as a whole, the processes of finance and accounting haven't really changed. But now we're throwing all this technology at them and they're scared. I survey and I work with a lot of CFOs and I ask them, for example, how well do you know AI and how it can change your business? And you know what I get back? Heather, I can spell it. So if you're wanting to gain someone's respect, make them feel special, make them feel smart. Do not use jargon when you're introducing maybe a complex idea. Use simple stories to guide them and tell them there are no stupid questions. I have found that when I go to CFOs and really explain why something's important, I do it in just everyday terminology, then they feel comfortable, they feel empowered, and they're more likely to fund my projects. Now, as you identify your project that you want, the first thing, obviously, is to identify the problem that needs to be solved. You want to get to what is the specific problem and what is the residual effect of that. And then you want to look at who else is affected. Now, I have a number of clients right now at Lodestar that are trying to get funding to upgrade to the latest version of maybe Cognos Analytics or Planning Analytics. And they're really struggling to get funding. And what the problem that they're having oftentimes is that they're like, hey, the software works. Well, it works, but is it empowering you to make those powerful decisions? Probably not. Or here's a bigger one, the risk factor. If you're on maybe a version that's old and the software vendor no longer supports that version, you're at high risk factor. We've had clients call us and say, hey, Heather, our infrastructure team upgraded such and such, and it broke our system. Well, they were on an unsupported version by the software vendor, and as a result, they couldn't get the support they needed. Now, that's a horrible place to be in, but I got to tell you, creating a compelling reason to upgrade just happened, right? So those can be some of the things, like you can spell out the risk factors of being on an old release that's not supported, especially if these systems that you're dealing with are mission critical, like closing the books. You also want to look at who else is affected by this problem, because you want to build your allies. You want a bunch of people that all say, yes, this is a good idea, as we're all going to benefit. Now, if you can twist that a little bit and find a reason why the project that you want to do benefits the finance department, even if it's a little thing, this can be hugely beneficial. We've done this in our upgrades of our BI for our clients, in that we tell them, hey, at least create a dashboard the finance will love as part of your, process, so that it helped them get that funding. Now, you also want to ask is, if the problem continues to go unsolved, what other problems arise? The upgrade scenario is a perfect example of that. If you just let things lie and don't take this project of upgrading, you could have a system down issue that you don't want to deal with. Now, as you go through this and you identify that problem, your job is going to be to bridge the gap between where we are today and where and why we want to go to the end result of this project, right? And in doing so, you want to estimate the cost of the problem, what it's costing your business, maybe in man hours, in opportunity costs, in risk factors. All of that should be part of this. And being able to clearly articulate those. Now, I'm a big notebook person, so I'd be getting out a notebook, I'd be writing down the problem, who it affects, and also handle objection handling. So I write down what every objection could be. And by the way, money is always one of them, right? So everyone always has money, but how can you overcome that objection? I'm going to give you a little secret. When you're presenting, if you use this thing called bounce, here's how bounce works. It's a presentation technique that I learned a number of years ago, and it's including them in your story. So how it works is, have you ever, or imagine a time when a company allowed the software to not be upgraded and then it broke. Think about the stress of that. Now, everybody's been through that, right? But the stress, everybody's struggling to figure out how to fix the problem. Like, you don't want to be in that situation. So that's a bounce that you were bringing them into our story and making it very personal to your decision maker. Now, ways you can, when you do this, you identify that problem, and now you want to look at possible solutions, right? So you want to show that you've done your due diligence and you've gone through and thought about all the possible solutions for this, right? How I do this is I'm a big fan of sticky notes. And here's a little exercise that you can do. Get a group of people in a room that are all familiar with this issue or problem and ask them to write down in an ideal world what life would look like. Now, when I do this, I set my phone as a timer for like 15 minutes. And I say, everyone take out a stack of sticky notes, and we're going to set the timer. And for 15 minutes, you're just going to write ideas. So, and sometimes I might do two colors. I might say, here's the problem or my dream, what I'd like a new solution to do. And then here's potential solutions. I might do that. And have everybody write those down for 15 minutes. Why do we set the clock? Well, here's a little secret. You're going to take as much time as you give yourself, right? Think about it. If I had to clean my house on Saturday, how long would it take me? All day Saturday. Because I'd probably end up finding a magazine, sitting on the couch, reading a little bit, and get distracted. But if someone texts me and say, hey, Heath, we're coming over in an hour, can't wait to see you, I'm going to run around my house like a chicken with my head cut off. The dog will look a little frazzled, and I'm going to be able to clean my entire house in 1 hour. So we're going to use that concept to get massive results in a very fast time. Use your sticky notes for ideas. Then what you're going to do is you're going to organize those sticky notes in priority. This is really going to help you get clarity. And if you do this with a group of people, what happens is you get lots of different ideas and you can get a really clear message. You're going to ask your peers at other companies how they've solved this problem. So trade groups, user groups, for those of you that are our Lodestar clients, we have a user group. What a great place to go ask people how they're solving a certain problem. And so join those organizations that can help network you with other people, or even go to LinkedIn, find people that are maybe in some of the same groups that you are, and pose the question, how did you solve this problem? Once you get ways to solve the problem, you're going to go identify possible vendors that can help this and have those initial discussions. Now, if you are trying to buy software, for example, and you haven't done this in a while, or maybe this is a type of software you've never bought, you've never run that software selection process, all you got to do is ask the vendor one simple question. Can you explain to me or provide me the typical process that clients go through when purchasing the software? Now, I know that when we do this for clients, we give them a checklist that says, when you're buying business intelligence software, here's the process you should probably go through, and you can add or delete items off that checklist. This is a great way to look like a rock star in your organization. So if you've never bought maybe CRM software, go ask some of the vendors, what's the typical process? Is there requirements discovery and then a demonstration? Is the demonstration first? Like, what does that look like? Because the software reps that you're working with that are trying to sell you stuff, they've been doing this for years. So why not just ask them? And maybe you have to do an RFP. Ask them for RFP questions. Don't do it yourself. Go ask them for the typically asked questions. You're going to save yourself a ton of time. And you should ask them also, what other questions should I have? So People always say, here's the frequently asked questions, and they're good, but I like to ask, what are the should ask questions? These are different than the frequently. This is assuming the person that you're asking has intimate knowledge and has been doing this for years, right? Ask them, what else should I be asking? And you're going to have tons of insight. You also want to ask them, what discover that internal process. So many of you might have to go to capital committee. Do you know if you have to go? Is it a certain dollar limit that then it has to go to capital committee? You want to do your research inside your organization to figure that out as well, because you're going to want to make sure you follow that process. And if you're buying software that has kind of a timeline to it, for example, budgeting, forecasting software, typically clients want to be live for the budget, which might be launching in August or September timeframe, right? Well, if there's that timeline, you want to back into that process and understand and make certain you have plenty of time to do the due diligence, ask the right questions, and kind of a little politicking internally to get that funding. Now, I'm a big fan of documenting your process. You wouldn't implement software without a project plan now, would you? Then why are you running a software selection process without a mini project plan? I start with a checklist. It can be a project plan or a checklist, but go through and define each step along the way. It's going to make you look really organized internally. And here's the deal. You're going to be so efficient in your process that your vendors that you're working with are going to love you. When we love the clients we're working with, we fight extra hard to get you a better discount. Think about it. It's kind of that pain in the butt factor, right? If you're doing and asking the vendors for 100 demos, number one, you're wasting your time, your executives' time or their approvers, and also the vendors' time. But if you do your requirements discovery first, you then have a demonstration of what services they're going to provide or what software, if it's actually buying software, and then they're going to show you how to solve the problems you're facing. It's going to be very efficient. The efficient sales cycle for a vendor means that they're going to fight harder for you and you're going to save more money. Now, the next thing that you want to do is define your decision makers. Now, this is really important to look at who internally really has the power to make this decision. And sometimes it's not who you think it is. You want to identify who they are. Sometimes you think that your boss can approve it, and it's really 2 levels up. So you want to make sure you understand who they are and what are their motives and needs. So some people like to be really significant. They like to be the ones with the flashy new car and everything. And how you could present to them is, if we do this project, you're going to be looked at as an industry leader in implementing the solution, right? So you're playing to that kind of ego. Now, if they're more of a growth person, meaning they love to learn, they love to try new things, you might say, hey, this is an opportunity for you really to explore how and learn how technology can really grow our business. Do you see how you go about it differently based on how the person's wired? So you want to know what their motives are, what their needs are. Some of them are just really risk adverse. And how do you think you'd present to a risk-adverse person? Well, you'd probably say, this is exactly how we're going to do it. Think of it this way. It's kind of like going on a trip. Have you ever gone on a trip where you didn't really plan? You just said, let's go. I have this buddy, John, who he used to call me periodically on a Friday and literally go, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. And he goes, let's go skiing. And an hour or 2 later, we'd be packing our stuff and hopping on a plane to go skiing. We had no plans, no hotels or reservations. We just were winging it. For us, that was fine. But there's other people that are so risk adverse that they would never do that. They have to know, when are they leaving, what days they're going to ski, where they're going to rent their skis, like everything. So understand how people are wired and make sure that if they're risk adverse people, you're giving them an exact roadmap or a bridge from where you are to exactly how you're going to get there. That's going to be very important. And then you're going to go look at How can your project help them accomplish their goals? So if they want to get promoted, how can your project help them? You got to make it about the decision maker, not about you guys. You make it about someone else. What's going to happen is they're going to look at you and think you're a rock star. They're going to love you because you helped them advance. How do they think and the problem could be solved? Asking the decision maker their opinion is really important because it kind of uncovers some preconceived notions that they have. This is also a really great way to identify what their objections are, right? Objections are often in the form of money. We don't have time for this right now, right? And when you understand those primary objections, you can really kind of think about how could I address this? Well, yes, time is somewhat limited, but if we could implement this new process or this new project that I'm requesting funding for, we're going to be short on time for 3 months, and then we're going to have so much more time to accomplish all this other stuff. So being able to identify what those objections are, how they think that problem could be solved, and getting ready to kind of present that whole program. Now, you also want to look at how the decision makers communicate. So a lot of executives out there have been very successful because they're creative and because they have ADD. Their minds go like this. They think of 20 different things at once. Now, if you've ever worked with someone like this, you know that they have a lot of challenges focusing. And you need to be cognizant of that. You need to present in the style in which they're wired. I can tell you, as a person with ADD, it's a struggle to keep focused. I like things kind of haphazardly. And we used to have this team member who was our first employee, and she was very verbose. Like when she wrote an email, it was like 10 pages long. It had so much detail. And I would literally send her an email back and say, I stopped after the second sentence, I put in big red letters, I stopped reading here. Give me cliff notes, please. Because I couldn't intake the knowledge and information she was giving me in that format. I wanted bullet points. So think about how they communicate. This is also going to be important in your presentation with them. If they are someone that's kind of like this, or they're always on their phone looking at things, then you want to be rapid fire in your presentation, talk a little bit faster, because it's going to be really comfortable for them. If you talk like this and you're slow and methodical, you will drive them nuts. I'm just saying, they're going to go bonkers because their brain goes at this speed. So figure that out, get to know that decision maker and how they're wired. And then how do they make decisions? So there's kind of two bases here in decision making as we study, how do people really make decisions? Now, we like to think that people make decisions based on fact, and that's actually majority of the time not true. They make it based on emotion. And that's why if you can tie in your project, how it can help them achieve their personal goals, get promoted, or maybe help the organization achieve strategic goals, that's going to have a lot more weight than you realize. Now, I always ask this question when I teach a class, especially business analytics or business intelligence professionals. One question I always ask them is, how many of you can clearly articulate the strategic goals of your company? Show your hands. I'd like to see it here. Go ahead, raise your hands up. Okay, well, here's the deal. When I teach this, less than 4% of business intelligence and analytics professionals can answer this question. Oh, less than 4%. So a room of 100, you have maybe 3.5 hands up. Guys, think about it. A business intelligence job, person's job is to deliver data and information in an easy to consume format for decision making so that people and the organization can achieve the strategic goals of the company. But yet they never bother to ask what the strategic goals are. Now, I blame executives when I present to CEO, CFO, and CIO groups. I always say, I call them out. I'm like, guys, it's your job to make sure your teams know what those strategic goals are. But if you're a BI professional or someone that's maybe not at the executive level yet, then you need to go ask. Now, at first, when you go ask, if you go to the CFO's office, you're like, hey, John, I'd like to talk to you. Like, can you help clarify what the strategic goals of the company are? At first, they're going to look at you like, almost like you have horns coming out of your head, like, what? And then they're going to be like, wow. And just say, my job is to deliver information. And I really feel the need, to help you achieve that goal. How can I help you do that? I need to know those goals. How do you think they're going to feel? How do you think they're going to feel about you? They're going to be like, this is someone I'm going to keep an eye on. This is someone I working on my team. Someone that's wondering how what they're doing fits in the bigger puzzle piece. That's going to make you guys look like a rock star. And guess what? You're going to gain more influence. You're going to get more respect. And when you ask for funding for projects, they're going to listen more. So try it. Now, in IT and finance teams, they kind of get this inherently. But when I work with IT teams, this is something that they often miss, depending on their level. The solution or project that you're trying to go for, you need to think of it in relationship to money. And I always say, you got to look at how does it make or save the organization money. If you can tie your project into cost savings or money-making opportunities, maybe it's going to help grow sales. You're more likely to be able to prove that ROI. And I do believe that when you're doing your project analysis and trying to get funding, you want to build that ROI. I just use Excel to do it. And I look at like how many man hours are spent manually doing stuff, what efficiencies would, how that'd save in man hours. How about the opportunity cost? What if we could gain, a handful of new clients every month? What would that look like? And so I start to try and build a return on investment strategy to help show how this project is going to help the company make or save X number of dollars. If you provide that insight, again, because many deals have to go through the CFO's office, those are going to have a much more likelihood of getting approved. So at the end of the day, what you really want to do is make sure you're asking the right questions. So when I go to somebody that I'm trying to get funding for, or I want to help, my go-to question absolutely always is, what's your biggest challenge? And a lot of times they're like, what? Like, I just anything. Now, I had one CFO I was working with, and I asked him, what's your biggest challenge? And it was around Christmas time, and he's like, finding my wife a Christmas present. And I kind of laughed. And the reason why I asked this question is maybe I know someone I can connect them with to solve this biggest challenge. Imagine helping someone solve their biggest challenge or dilemma and just freeing that stress that they have. How are they going to feel connected to you? So in this case, the individual said this, and I said, well, let's talk a little bit about your spouse. Like, what is she like? And he starts to explain how she loves gardening and she's always playing outside. And they were in Illinois, so I know that soil is like clay. I mean, it's not good dirt up there. Most of the places have stripped off all the good topsoil, and there's just hard clay. So I said, I got this. I said, you're going to buy her a rototiller. You know those little machines that you go and kind of chop up the garden? I said, you're going to buy a rototiller, but don't go all manly. Don't go buy one of those big ones. His wife was about my size. I said, you get her this little one. At the time, Honda made one. Here's what I would do. And he's like, really? I'm going to give her a power tool? I'm like, absolutely. By the way, women do. We like power tools. But anyway, so he kind of looked at me crazy, but he did it. And so he literally calls me the day after Christmas. Is like, oh my gosh, like that was amazing. She had tears flowing down her cheeks because she was so shocked at how thoughtful the gift was. And then she even made a comment that thankfully you didn't go buy the big one, that this is something I could manage. And to this day, that CFO and I are very strongly connected. If I ever place a call, it goes through. Why? Because I helped him in a time of need solve a problem that took me, maybe 5 minutes to come up with. Now, sometimes you're not able to solve their challenges, but people like to share and be able to kind of vent. So just being a good listener is going to help you. So add that for every conversation you have. Try it on a friend. Watch what happens. You're going to have much deeper connections, much deeper relationships. And I got to tell you, it's so much more fulfilling. I mean, like, it's from the heart. So what's your biggest challenge is going to be your go-to question. And then I always like to say, do you support this initiative? When you're dealing with a decision maker, you want to find out if they support this. A true story. I had a client a number of years ago, the CFO, we took them to Cognos BI events where they saw dashboarding for the first time. This was a number of years back. And they were like, wow, like that's exactly what I want. I want a dashboard of my business. And they said, how do I get that? I said, well, obviously we can help you with that. We can sell you some software. And let's start planning that out. I went back to my office. I called the CIO and I said, hey, we went to this event. The CFO loved this stuff. I want to talk to you about how do we make this happen? And do you support this initiative? You know what his answer was? Absolutely not. Like, no way. And I'm like, what? I'm going to give you new toys. These are like fun, cool stuff. And he's like, Heather, I can't support this initiative because we have horrible data. Our data is a mess. We don't have standardizations. We don't have master data management. Like, it is disaster. And if you give the finance team some great shiny tools, they're going to have these pretty looking reports off absolutely junk data that could be disastrous for our organization. And you know what? He was absolutely right. I said, gosh, you are absolutely right. How would you like to solve this problem? He says, I've been asking for funding for 5 years for a data warehouse. 5 years. And I said, gosh, that must be really frustrating. Feel that empathy, right? He's like, oh my gosh, like every year I ask the CFO for the money and he says no. And I said, if I can help you solve that problem, would you support this project? He's like, absolutely. I'd love those tools, but only if we have good data foundation to report off of. I said, great. I called a meeting. Now I coached the CIO to have all the numbers ready at how much the data warehouse would cost, what kind of timeline. We were prepared. So I first did a little demonstration of the dashboards. The CFO was like, that's exactly what I want, right? And then I said to the CIO, what are your thoughts? And I coached him how to explain that the junk data would not help them with their pretty dashboards and that he needed funding for a data warehouse to fix this. So he started to walk through it and explained it. And the CFO goes, wait, so that's why you've been asking for funding for the data warehouse? And the CIO was like, yeah. He's like, oh, I just thought you were just trying to clean some stuff up. I didn't realize what it could do for me. And he said, how much would this cost and how quickly would we have it done? And literally within 40 minutes, the CFO had approved this funding for a project that the CIO wanted to do for the last 5 years. Like, boom, the CIO almost fell off his chair that it happened so fast. And at the same time, the CFO now has a path to success and funded the project for the BI software as well. So understanding if people support it and then asking, how would they solve that problem if they say no, is like mastery. It really does work, and you can understand the objections that you need to address with. And then asking what their 1-year goal is. Like, what does success look like for this project, and having that defined as well. So make sure you start to ask the probing questions. And then here's the thing. Turn off our brains. If you're like me and you're highly analytical, I think we have a genetic defect, right? So our brains like to solve problems. And when someone says, Heather, I have a problem, I'm like, right? Like I'm going and I'm answering the question. And I need to stop that. I need to turn the brain off and just listen, because usually the bigger problem is further down the road. But if you're highly analytical like me and you love problem solving, what happens is our brains kick in and we're like, the data's here and I can do this and I'll pull it together here. And we stop listening and we're solving way too early. So be really conscious when you're going in to ask these questions that you're not trying to solve the problem. You're just gathering the details. When you get back to your desk, you can start to put the pieces in play and say, how can I solve this problem? But really watch that active listening. Actually, you want a trick? You want a trick to really make yourself a great engaged listener? Go take an improv class. Second City in Chicago has a fabulous one. I think they're now doing them online. And go to improv, like comedy improv, because in improv, you have no clue what the person's going to say. So you can't be crafting your next message. You've got to be fully present. And it is super empowering for everybody that wants to be better at active listening. Okay, so your job also is to bridge the gap, right? So you want to bridge the gap from the current state, the problems, the stress, get to that emotional level, that exposed level. What do people fear with the current system? Do they fear that one upgrade from Microsoft's going to break the whole thing? Okay, acknowledge that. Focus on it. And then how do we resolve that problem? What tools, what people, what processes, what's that timeline look like? And really help bridge the gap. Show the plan to get you from A to B, being the future state of where we want to go. What's it going to look like and feel like to have the reports bursting out automatically and everybody updating, people empowered to use the technology to do their own analytics, whatever it is, help achieve and paint that vision of where you're going, and more importantly, how you're going to get there. You definitely want to align the right team members. And I threw this slide in because it's almost like a word of caution, because I've seen it done wrong so many times. People will spend all this time and effort to evaluate software. They'll buy maybe a business intelligence package or maybe a planning analytics package. And then they literally just take, oh, we have a new guy. He's been with the company for 3 weeks and we're going to plunk him down and he's going to run this team. Like, whoa, wait. Making sure you have the right team members. If you're going to deploy something that's supposed to be very strategic with your organization, it's probably better to have someone with some knowledge of your organization. Someone that's been there 3 weeks, that's going to be a challenge. Now, I'm not saying you have to rule them out. I'm just saying be careful and really consider what team members that you're going to put on it. A lot of times people will just try and put warm bodies, for example, on a business intelligence engagement. And I'm always like, no, give me the right people. Give me maybe a subject matter expert from each department. Let me empower them and teach them how to use the tools, and then go let them be the go-to person for each of those departments. Now that would be super powerful. But a lot of times people don't want to give up their rock stars. They will give you kind of the person like, oh, Bob's not real busy. We'll give you Bob. But if your project is going to help the company achieve its strategic goals, you want to try and get the rock stars on it. It's going to be more successful then. So making sure that you evaluate, and we call it getting the right butts in the right seats. Don't just use warm bodies. The next thing that I'm going to tell you is learn to present. Now, I get that people's greatest fear is presenting, but that means if you make this just a little bit better than you are today by learning a few things about presenting, you're going to raise your skills, raise your visibility, and people will respect you more. Just by standing up in front of a room to present, you've already gained respect, because so many people are, gosh, I'd hate to do that, right? Now, if you're in IT, you kind of have a bad rap, right? There's been a lot of really boring technology presentations. I know that I'm on webinars all the time that I want to poke my eyes out because they're so boring. They're monotone. They're not telling stories. And here's the great thing about that, guys. If you're in IT or finance, we're not the greatest presenters either. The bar is set really, really low, like really low. Like all you have to do is like show up and with a little energy and boom, you're way better than most presenters in technology. So, think about that. Now learn to tell stories when you present. Always use these analogies, try and blend in stories that people will remember. We are biologically wired to remember stories. So start using them. Use analogies. I use these all the time. I try and create new analogies, and then I try them. And if they flop, I don't use them again. But if I do, I gift them to other people and say, next time you're trying to explain this concept, try this little analogy. So make sure that you're practicing those and even bounce them off some of your coworkers, right? Know your audience. We've already talked about that, about understanding their needs and how they're wired. Do they have ADD? Do they like things really fast? Or do they like it a little bit more methodical? And make sure that you explain the why this is important. And when I say that, it's not just why for me as the presenter, why for the organization, why for the key decision maker, how is it going to make her or him look better? You want to incorporate those whys. If you're looking for a great book about why, get Simon Sinek's Start With Why, one of my favorite books, one of my favorite authors. His books are available on Audible as well. So check that out. But improve your presentation game. I do have on one of my YouTube channels, I do have a how to do a great software demonstration video that you can check out where I share some of the secrets to presenting software. If you want that, just email me and I can send you the link to that if you can't find it. I also believe it's important to leverage Agile or Scrum processes in your projects. Because if you have a big project that maybe, let's say it's going to take 6 months to a year to accomplish, like when executives invest in this project, they want to know after a couple of weeks where it's at, how it's going. So by using an Agile or Scrum process, you have little sprints, and then you show something or at least communicate where you're at. And then if the business changed during that time, I mean, we saw with COVID, everything changed, right? You're able to be agile enough to switch and pivot if need be. So if you're not familiar with Agile and Scrum, I recommend the book by Jeff Sutherland. I believe it's How to Do Twice as Much in Half the Time. Jeff Sutherland is one of the creators of the Scrum methodology. So definitely check that out. Think about how you can leverage these new project management methodologies like Agile and Scrum to show people incrementally how you're making progress, because that's going to set you up for success, because you'll understand if their definition of success changed and be able to pivot earlier, as well as giving them little feedbacks so that they can realign you more in line with their expectations. So that's it. I'm Heather Cole. As I said, I would love to connect with you. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, please go to LinkedIn right now. Go look for me, Heather L. Cole. There's a lot of Heather Coles out there. So try and throw my middle initial and you should find me in Tampa, Florida. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this webinar. This is part of our Lodestar Client Success Series that we just launched this year in 2021. We will be hosting an event every month on different topics that we hear and that our clients could benefit from. So we'll also be putting those out for you to go back to. If you have other team members that you are like, oh, I wish that Bob could have seen this, we'll make sure that we share that link for you. So please do me a favor. Right now, send me a quick email. Tell me what you thought about it. If you loved it, great. Tell me what you learned. If you thought this was a waste of your time, tell me that too. I can't get better unless you guys give me feedback. So that's it from Lodestar Solutions. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar series, and have a fabulous day.